Ireland goes to the polls next week after its leader Simon Harris called a snap election. Voters' main concerns centre around a housing crisis and an influx of migrants. So will the ruling coalition hold its share of the vote, or will there be a surprise? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, next week's vote in Ireland has been called the election of a lifetime by Sinn Fein leader Mary Lou McDonald. She says it's a chance to form a government without Fine Gael or Fianna Fail, the two main parties who have dominated Irish politics for a century.
A snap general election just before Christmas. Ireland's Prime Minister Simon Harris made the announcement as his party Fine Gael is experiencing a surge in popularity.
Others will, of course, seek alternative mandates. And it's vital we have an election that fully considers our very different visions for our country's economic and social future. The progress Ireland has made and can make should never be taken for granted.
In April, Harris became the youngest ever Irish leader after his predecessor, Leo Varadkar's shock resignation. The election comes as the main opposition party, Sinn Fein, has seen a fall in support.
In this election, there is a clear choice. Another Fine Gael or Fianna Fail government, or a new government for working people, for families, for communities, a government led by Sinn Fein.
So, what are the key concerns? Immigration. It is at its highest level since 2007. Housing crisis. There is a shortage of houses and a high cost in renting and buying homes. Homelessness. A record number of people are living on the streets. And public transport. It's suffering from poor infrastructure and underinvestment. Despite these issues, voters will soon begin seeing the first benefits of the recent giveaway budget, which saw personal taxes cut. It follows a tax windfall from tech giant Apple, which is repaying the government billions of dollars in unpaid taxes. With just 3 weeks of campaigning, can the coalitions rally enough support, or will voters signal they're ready for change?
Well, let's meet our guests. Joining us from Dublin is Frances Fitzgerald. She's former Deputy Prime Minister or Taoiseach in Ireland and former member of the European Parliament from Ireland. In Cork, we have Jonathan Healy, who is a well-known Irish broadcaster. And from Belfast, we have Professor Deirdre Heenan. She's a Professor of Social Policy at Ulster University. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Frances, I'll come to you first. The Taoiseach or Prime Minister Simon Harris, he could have delayed this until March, but he's called a snap election. The first question is, why now?
I guess he would say, why not now? I think it seemed to come to a natural conclusion. And rather than go further into the winter months, I think it was time to go within the coalition. That seems to have been the feeling. Obviously, there was a discussion with the two other leaders, Micheál Martin and Roderick O'Gorman of the Greens. And Roderick, in fact, announced the date ahead of anybody else. So the Taoiseach then decided to go. I think it's an opportune time. You know, there's a lot done. The budget was through. He always said he wanted to get the finance bill through. We're in a very good economic situation here where we have a budgetary surplus, unlike, for example, the UK. And I think after the budget, which was a very positive budget, the coalition leaders, I mean, they just felt, and the Taoiseach felt, let's put it to the people now and see what the response is.
Jonathan, what are the people saying? You know, you're on air every day, you're talking to people all over Ireland. What are the key issues?
The key issues are the same issues that have dominated Irish political discussions for the last number of years. This is an election that's happening because it quite simply has to happen under the Constitution. It has a 5-year cycle, every government, so it's not like the government fell apart or anything. It's just it had to go back to the people at some point. Ireland is riding the crest of an economic wave at the moment. Enda, we have got full employment in the country. We've got unemployment less than 4.5% right now. And we have got a massive economic surplus at the moment. 25 billion euro extra in the coffers for the government when they went to the country. So that allowed them to get a budget through that has seen pretty much everybody in the country have some extra money in their pockets. And we also have a huge amount of money that has come in from the Apple ruling, which you may have heard about, that has given rise to an extra 14 billion that is being decided upon by all the parties as to what they would do. It's mostly going into infrastructure. But on the actual campaign trail, the big ticket issues so far are housing, which is something that Ireland has been struggling with since 2007. We simply have not been building enough houses to meet the demand that's out there. Rents are an issue as well. And the spectre of immigration, the same issue that has been impacting countries right across Europe, has risen here. And every party has been trying to get to grips with what has been an influx of people, how you manage them, how you look after them, how you integrate them. The far right has been trying to capitalise on that, but most of the main political parties here are pretty much at item that more needs to be done in immigration, and in their discussions on how they're going to do it, to be quite honest, they're not differing that much. The key is to stop people having the needs to come here, but then again, in a full economy where we have full employment, we actually need more people to come to Ireland to ensure the economy continues to grow.
So Deirdre, in short, this election is all about more houses and fewer migrants coming in. Is that a fair summary?
No, I don't think so. I think the issues in this election are the issues that we are seeing globally. Yes, it's about housing, but it's also about a cost of living crisis. It's also about migration, immigration. But if we look to the American election, I think there is a lesson there for anyone standing for election, and that's about listening to people and their concerns and what are they voting about. And we see very much from the American election, it was about the pound in their pocket. So you may well tell people that your economy is riding the crest of a wave. You may well talk about an Apple surplus and having a budget giveaway, but people have to feel that in their pockets. They have to feel like they are better off. They have to feel like the cost of living crisis has passed. And many people in Ireland are still feeling that housing is the number one issue for them. They cannot get onto the housing ladder. It's beyond their reach. House prices have risen extraordinarily over the last 10 years. Young people in particular are saying, this is beyond my reach. We are seeing increasing numbers of people living in the north of Ireland and commuting across the border where house prices are more reasonable in the north. We're seeing boom around towns like Newry, Banbridge, where people have had to move and travel. So housing is an issue, and what we're beginning to see is the political parties in the coalition now talking about the bonanza after this election, what they are going to do. And of course, the parties are trying to outdo each other in saying, we will build more social housing, we will put a cap on rents, we will try to introduce a raft of measures to allow people onto the home ownership ladder. So housing is, I would say, still the biggest issue in terms of this election. But there's also the cost of living crisis. And another issue that has come forward in the last 6 months, and it's an issue in the north as well, is childcare, accessible, affordable childcare. We don't have enough childcare, and the childcare that we have is extremely expensive.
Francis, just give me your assessment then of Sinn Fein. Last time round, they did extremely well, historic results for them. And yet I see the most recent poll, they've dropped maybe 16% points in a year. What has Mary Lou McDonald done wrong in the last 12 months?
Well, it's an interesting question. There's been a series of mistakes that I think Sinn Fein have made in terms of the public. One of the first was after the riots in Dublin. She called for the resignation of both the Minister for Finance, or the Minister, for Justice, the Minister for Justice, and the Garda Commissioner. And the public generally didn't feel that was the time to do that. There's been the child protection scandals. I mean, the polls are just showing a very dramatic drop, down to 15, 16, 19, but much, much lower, because there was a discussion here about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that it was taken for granted almost. The speculation was that Mary Lou could be the first female Taoiseach, and that Sinn Féin would do very well. I think that's all changed. We have a new leader in Fine Gael, in Simon Harris, who has brought this energy to get things done, has really invigorated the party, and Fine Gael have been leading in the polls, with Fianna Fail not very far behind. And the point I would make in an Irish election, like so many, there is huge choice for the public, and you can take nothing for granted. I mean, there are many, many other smaller parties. There's the Labour Party. How is that going to do? Social Democrats, and so on. And we saw in the European elections quite a few independents being elected. So the scenario is, you cannot take anything for granted in terms of outcome. If you're going by the polls, clearly Fianna Fail and Fine Gael, plus maybe one other party, look like they could make up a government, but nobody's voted yet. And I would agree about the issues. I would add in a few others, and I've been out canvassing a lot. Mental health is certainly coming up. People want to see more supports. Childcare is definitely, as Deirdre said, huge issue, and I'm really pleased to see the commitment actually by all the parties to finally move to a universal, accessible, high quality service for children, because people are paying a fortune for it. They really are. And the cost of living, small businesses finding things very, very difficult in the high street, much like the UK, that high street issue with premises closing, restaurants closing. And so, quite a few of the parties are making points about supporting small business.
Jonathan, give us your impression of the Taoiseach, Simon Harris, Ireland's leader, international community just getting to know him as he works his way into the job. He's Ireland's youngest ever leader. He's 38 years old.
Yes, a very enigmatic, dynamic young politician, has been involved in politics pretty much all of his life, from when he was a teenager. Many journalists from his native county of Wicklow would have talked about how he used to always send press releases in, even when he was a young teenager. And one joked to me once that they used to refer to the fax machine as the latest from the country's next Taoiseach. They were proved right. Now, Fine Gael have got a bit of a problem insofar as a lot of the candidates that they would have run in this election have decided to stand down. Many of them took that decision when it looked a little bleaker for the party. They decided that perhaps after 14 years in government, maybe they were heading for a period in opposition, and many of them simply didn't want that. So as a result, Fine Gael is running a campaign that's very much built around Simon Harris as the potential Taoiseach of the country. That could give rise to potential problems insofar as there will be new candidates coming forward. Will the Fine Gael ticket be strong enough? Fianna Fail, on the other hand, the yin to the Irish political yang that is Fine Gael, they have Micheál Martin, somebody who has been in charge of their party for a very long period of time, brought it back from the brink of extinction after the economic crash of 07-08. He is one of the most popular leaders, and was one of the most popular leaders. He will be seeking to go back in with Fianna Fáil having as many seats as Fine Gael, if not perhaps some more, depending on how the day goes. So what the expectation is right now, Enda, is that we will see those two parties, the parties that existed at the foundation of the Irish state 100 years ago, that just went on slightly different political paths, that the coalition between them, the grand coalition as it was described, will continue. The question is, who will form the third leg of that stool? The Green Party, who have fulfilled that role to date, it looks like the tide has gone out on them. It's very unlikely they're going to retain the same number of seats that they had. In fact, there's some speculation it might be a particularly grim night for the Greens when the votes are counted after November the 29th, which means then it will fall to somebody else. Could it be the Labour Party? Traditionally, the party that would have propped up coalition governments, they also suffered as a result of the economic crash. They may very well be in the shake-up, as could be a smaller party called the Social Democrats. Again, cut from the same cloth. But then we have have the big imponderable, the independents. The independents have hoovered up a lot of the disaffected vote that in a previous time could have gone to Sinn Fein. Now what we have are people who call themselves independent, but obviously are campaigning on local issues, particularly big personalities. They have started to form groupings, and in those groupings there's the potential to join a government, take a couple of ministries, and help decide the course of the next government. It will be a complicated, drawn-out process. Any formation of a government in Ireland is, but the question will be, who will be the Taoiseach? Will it be Simon Harris? Will it be Micheál Martin first? Will they job share? The only thing is, and as has been pointed out by Deirdre, that we had expected Sinn Féin to be in the shake-up to form the next government. The likelihood of that right now is very slim for the reasons that have been outlined.
Deirdre, just give us your impression as to why the reunification of Ireland is never an election issue. People talk about the economy, housing, healthcare, migration. It's never brought up whenever there's an election cycle in Ireland. Talk about a united Ireland rarely gets airtime.
I suppose when we carry out research around this question, and was involved in the Northern Ireland Life and Times, for example, people would quite simply say to you, no one gets out of bed in the morning thinking, I wonder when a united Ireland's going to appear. Will it be today, next week, or the end of the year? People are getting out of bed concerned about the things that you might expect across the UK. They're worried about the cost of living crisis. They're worried about the economy. They're worried about their children and their children's education. So this is an existential issue. And after the Good Friday Agreement, it was something that we talked about in very far off terms. Yes, we might have a border poll and there may be reunification, but it appears to be a very long way away. Brexit changed all that. It changed the political dynamics, north and south, and it changed the relationship with the London government. During the Brexit toxic period, we were often told, oh, there'll be a border poll within 5 years, there'll be a border poll within 10 years. And so conversations started about this border poll and reunification. But in the end, people are still saying, whilst we've seen the rise of Sinn Féin, particularly in the north, and they are the largest party in the north, one might have guessed that that would be alongside a wave of fervent republicanism or nationalism, and that simply hasn't happened. So whilst we've had the growth of Sinn Féin, alongside that, we haven't had people yearning for reunification, yearning for constitutional change. What people are saying is we've come through such a turbulent time in terms of Brexit, remembering that we were very much in the eye of the storm. We've had a global crisis. We've had a cost of living crisis. And of course, not least, we've had COVID-19. So people want a period of stability, and they want to see what this might look like were we to have constitutional change. We have learnt from Brexit that to vote for the great unknown is a recipe for disaster. So what is really notable is Sinn Féin in the north, under the leadership of Michelle O'Neill, who's our First Minister, very rarely talks about a border poll. She is now talking in very different terms about making Northern Ireland work, something that was unthinkable a very short time ago, because there is a realisation that being in government means you have to deliver for people.
Frances, just give us your take on that whole issue.
Well, not one person has discussed that with me as I go around canvassing, which is very interesting. It's absolutely cost of living, day-to-day problems, housing, what's going to happen, how are we going to change the delivery of infrastructure in Ireland? And it's interesting, because many of the issues are the problems of a growing economy, more people coming to live in Ireland, a big population, dealing with migration from a very practical point of view, more people coming in to work and all of the, foreign direct investment that we have. And trying to keep up at an infrastructure level is the problem. And this is the challenge for the next government. How are you going to deliver? And I think it's a challenge across Europe, by the way. But with a growing economy, it's even more of a challenge. How are you going to deliver the services that people need? We have the money. I mean, this is the irony compared to many other countries. We have the money. It's trying to get up to speed. I mean, we lost between 8 and 10 years of house building. And so we have to accelerate hugely to deal what is at the top of people's minds.
Jonathan.
And can I just say that we're looking from the north with great envy because you have the money and you have a surplus, and we are constantly talking about our budget crisis, and we are in the complete opposite position where we do not have the money to even deliver the necessities. So we don't have the luxury of thinking about how we're going to spend our surplus.
Jonathan.
I think, Enda, that really sums up the point here. What the Irish electorate is looking for in the parties and the politicians that are knocking on the door right now is a sense of competence. We know we have the money. We have got a financial backdrop that other European countries quite simply do not have. We have massive budget surplus. Our economy is doing well. We've insulated ourselves despite the shocks that have hit us since the big crash in 2007, 2008. So the question is, who out of the political options that are being presented do we trust more with the future of the state than anyone else? And I think that that is the decision that people are going to make when it comes to November the 29th. And like everything else, people will make an opinion. They will share and differ opinions. I think that we are heading back to something very similar to what we have now, with the two largest parties being Fianna Fail, Fine Gael. It's who that third party in government will be and how quickly that government can be formed. But if you're looking for a political earthquake after the Irish election, I think you may be left wanting.
So, Jonathan, just on the issue of the Apple money, 13 billion euros landing in the Irish government's lap that no politician has earned. This was an absolute fluke, a taxation ruling. It's 14% of the annual public spending budget. I mean, whoever's coming in as Taoiseach or Prime Minister is going to be a very, very lucky politician.
Absolutely. And all of them, to be fair, are looking at different ways of spending that it will invest in the type of infrastructure that Francis has been talking about, in making sure that we can address things like childcare. In fact, if you delve into all of the political manifestos that are out there, one of the key things that's in each of them is how we're going to deal with childcare. You know, parties saying you can have a maximum spend of maybe €600 per month. That would be incredible for families right now, particularly who have a number of children, many people being forced out of the workforce because it's simply not viable to stay on. Not a unique problem to Ireland, but potentially a unique solution. The other thing when it comes to competence is, can we trust whatever government is there to spend money wisely? We have a national children's hospital that is being built right now in Dublin. It will be state of the art. It will be world leading. It is already 3 or 4 times over budget from when it started. And that leaves a bitter taste in the vote and the voice and the throat, rather, of the electorate, because they're going to look at that and say, well, it's great having 13, 14 billion coming in from Apple. But if we don't spend it well, and if we don't trust the people to spend it well, what is the point in having it? But that said, we are going to end up with better infrastructure in Ireland as a result of this. Bear in mind, the Irish government said they didn't want it, but that was a bit of a game, really, because they had to accept the European Court's ruling at the end of it. And initially they'd said that the money wasn't owed. We have it now. It's a question of how we spend it.
Deirdre, give us your prediction. Will it be the status quo, or can you see Mary Lou McDonald and Sinn Fein springing the political surprise of the year?
Well, I think the Irish political system is fascinating, and fascinating for political scientists, because normally when we have elections, they're on the basis of change. Don't you want change? This election gives you an opportunity for change. I would be very surprised if we don't end up in the same position where we will have the grand coalition of 2 parties. And the reality is, increasingly, it's very difficult to put a cigarette paper between them in terms of policies and what they are promising.
Well, let's just get Francis on that. So, Francis, Deirdre's saying that Fine Gael is effectively Fianna Fail. What's the difference for Irish voters if people vote for your party?
Oh, I think there is a difference, but we can be, and I would need more time than you have on this program to tell you that. But basically, I mean, I do think that, you know, we've worked in coalition, different emphasis, different history. You know, we were always more pro-European, pro-business. You know, there are differences, but, you know, obviously we do share much now in terms of, you know, the priorities that are out there and need addressing. But, you know, I wouldn't rule out some surprises actually in this election. I think the public have a huge amount of choice in terms of, you know, between Sinn Fein and the Independents, or indeed Social Democrat and Labour. You could, I think, see one or other of those parties coming through with slightly more seats. You know, in the Greens, generally people feel they won't do as well. Independents, and the independents in Ireland are a very mixed lot. They really are. are. Some of them are former Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael. Some are, one issue, kind of local issue candidates. So, there is obviously some disillusionment with politics as well, no question. And there is a cynicism. And that point Jonathan made about, wanting to trust and making sure that people are accountable, to the spending of the money, that's very big. And the parties, all of the parties, have to be very clear how they're going to deal with that, because we've had some very bad examples recently. So I think it's all to play for. As I say, you can never take it for granted. And even though my two colleagues here today are very strong about, Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, we just, no one's cast a vote yet. I hope they're right about Fine Gael, incidentally, but there you go.
Do. Jonathan, final point to you. This is Simon Harris's election to lose, isn't it?
Absolutely. Purely because the campaign has been very much built around him. If you look at the posters that are on the lampposts, it's all around Simon Harris. It's about his vision. They don't have the same depth in their front bench that they would have had, because many people have retired. So in many ways, it is going to be a personality-based election based on him. As I said, he is popular. He has hit the ground running, but he hasn't had a huge amount of time to bed in as the leader of the country. So that may come back as a disadvantage. His coalition leader partner, Micheál Martin of Fianna Fáil, he has been around a lot longer. He knows what it's like to get into those scraps more than he does. But I think that what we will see is Simon Harris do well. Fine Gael's campaign off to a little bit of a faltering start. Sorry, Francis. But that said, we still have 2 weeks to run on it. And 2 weeks, as they would say, is a very long time in politics.
It is indeed. Jonathan, Deirdre and Francis, thank you all so much. Gorv Mila Mahagwiv. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.